AITA for refusing to let my sister move into my house after her husband kicked her out. So, this situation is a bit complicated, and I honestly don't know if I'm being too harsh or if I'm in the right. I, 29M, have an older sister, Lisa, 33F, who has been married to her husband, Tom, 35M, for about 6 years. Their marriage has always been pretty rocky, and while I've never liked Tom, I try to stay out of it because it's her life. Over the years, I've seen signs that he wasn't the greatest to her, but she would always defend him and insist that they were fine. That said, there have been a few incidents where I've had to step in because things went too far, but Lisa always made excuses for him and told me to back off. About 2 months ago, Lisa called me out of the blue, asking if she could move in with me. She sounded really upset, but didn't give me too many details. When I asked what happened, she said that Tom kicked her out of the house. I was shocked, to say the least. Lisa and Tom had been having problems, but I didn't think it was that bad. I knew they were arguing a lot, but I thought it was just typical marriage issues. Apparently, they'd had a huge blow-up after Tom found out that Lisa had been talking to her ex on social media. Nothing inappropriate, just catching up and talking about old times. Tom had gone ballistic, accusing her of cheating, and kicked her out of their house. Lisa tried to go back and apologize, but he wouldn't let her. She didn't have anywhere else to go and ended up at a friend's place for a few days. I'm not going to lie, hearing this hit me like a ton of bricks. Part of me wanted to tell her that I'd always had a bad feeling about Tom, but I didn't want to make her feel worse. So, I told her that, of course, she could stay with me until she got things figured out. I live in a decent-sized 3-bedroom house, and I wasn't using all of the space, so I figured it wouldn't be an issue. She seemed relieved and grateful, and I told her that she was welcome anytime. Lisa moved in the following week, and that's when things started to get difficult. Initially, everything seemed fine, and I thought we were handling it well. She was mostly staying in her room, and I tried to give her space, knowing that she was going through a lot. But then, things started to get a bit tense between us. I'm a pretty laid-back person, but Lisa can be really difficult to live with. She's messy and doesn't respect boundaries. She would leave dirty dishes around the house, leave her clothes all over the place, and would often come into my room without knocking, which made me uncomfortable. I'm the type of person who likes my space and privacy, and I tried to be understanding at first because I knew she was going through a rough patch. However, as time went on, I started to get really frustrated. It wasn't just the messiness, but also the emotional burden. Lisa would cry to me every day about Tom, telling me how sorry she was for what happened and how much she missed him. It felt like all she talked about was Tom, and every conversation revolved around him. I'm not saying that she wasn't allowed to be upset, but it felt like it was all-consuming. At one point, I had to tell her that while I wanted to be supportive, I couldn't keep hearing the same things over and over again. I also pointed out that she needed to make a decision, either move on or try to fix things with Tom, but this in-between phase was hurting her more than helping her. She didn't take that well at all. She said I was being insensitive and that I didn't understand what she was going through. We had a huge argument about it, and after that, things got even more tense. She started snapping at me for the smallest things, like when I asked her to clean up after herself, or if I was a little curt when responding to her questions. I was getting to the point where I felt like I couldn't do anything right. I would come home from work, and she would act like I was the one being unreasonable. About 3 weeks ago, I finally reached my breaking point. I had come home to find that Lisa had used my bathroom, left it a mess, and didn't even bother to clean up after herself. This was the 3rd time she'd done it, and I was beyond frustrated. When I confronted her about it, she just brushed it off like it was no big deal. I told her that I needed her to respect the house and the rules, or she couldn't stay here anymore. She immediately started crying and said that I was throwing her out when she had nowhere else to go. That's when I got really torn. On one hand, I didn't want to kick my sister out, especially with her marriage falling apart. On the other hand, I was seriously at my wit's end. I didn't sign up to be her therapist or her maid. We ended up having a huge argument that night, and I told her that she needed to figure things out with Tom or move on, but she couldn't keep living in my house without respecting my space and my boundaries. I told her that if things didn't change, she would have to find somewhere else to stay. The next day, she packed her things and left. She told me that she couldn't believe I would kick her out like that, especially after everything she had been through. She called me a bad brother and said I was being selfish. I felt terrible about it, but at the same time, I knew I couldn't keep going like this. Since then, she's been really distant with me, and I feel like our relationship is strained. I still feel for her, and I want to support her, but I'm not sure if I did the right thing. My family has gotten involved, and my mom and dad both think I should have been more patient with Lisa. They say I'm being harsh and that I should have just let her stay until she figured things out. My friends, on the other hand, say I did the right thing and that it's not my responsibility to take on her emotional baggage, especially when she wasn't respecting my boundaries. Now, I'm just left wondering if I'm the asshole for setting boundaries with my sister when she needed help the most. AITA for telling her she had to move out? Enjoyed the video? Then hit like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more amazing videos. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you'll be the first to know when a new video is out. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. AITA for not forgiving my brother after he publicly humiliated me for something I did years ago. Okay, so this is a bit of a long story, and I'm hoping I can get some clarity on whether I'm in the wrong here. My 28F brother, 31M, and I have always had a bit of a strained relationship, but things took a turn a few years ago that I can't seem to move past. To give some background, I'll admit that I've made some poor decisions in my life. Growing up, I was always the wild child in our family. I was rebellious, did things I shouldn't have, and honestly, I didn't always make the best choices. However, I wasn't a terrible person. I didn't hurt anyone or do anything intentionally malicious, but I was a bit selfish at times. I'll be upfront about that. When I was 22, I was in a toxic relationship. It wasn't healthy, and looking back, I can see how damaging it was. But at the time, I was caught up in it. My brother, who had always been more responsible and a bit of a perfectionist, constantly lectured me about the relationship and tried to tell me I needed to get out of it. He was right, but I didn't want to hear it. I resented his interference because I felt like he didn't understand what I was going through. At some point during that relationship, my brother and I had a massive falling out. He found out that I had done something really stupid. I had lied to him about where I was and who I was with. It wasn't a big deal in the grand scheme of things, but to him, it was a breach of trust. He confronted me, and I tried to explain myself, but we ended up yelling at each other. I was angry at him for prying into my personal life, and he was frustrated with me for making such reckless decisions. After that argument, we didn't speak for several months. The relationship ended not long after that, and I was embarrassed by how things had played out. I felt guilty for how I had treated my brother, but at the time, I was just focusing on trying to move forward with my life. I figured things would get better between us eventually. Fast forward to a couple of years later. I was working on rebuilding my life and had started to take responsibility for the things I had done. My brother and I had started talking again, and while things weren't perfect, I was hoping that we could eventually repair our relationship. He had a girlfriend at this point, and I genuinely tried to be supportive of him, even though I was still a bit bitter about how things had gone down before. A year ago, my brother and I were at a family event, and something happened that completely changed everything. During a speech at the event, it was one of those informal, just celebrating family gatherings. My brother, who was giving a speech, decided to bring up our past. He didn't say it outright, but he referenced a time when someone in our family made some really bad choices and betrayed the trust of someone who loved them. Everyone was laughing and joking, and I thought it was just his typical self-deprecating humor. But then he turned to me in front of everyone, pointed directly at me, and said, "And no, I'm not talking about anyone in this room, except for my little sister here." At that moment, I felt like my heart dropped into my stomach. The whole room went silent. I could see the looks on my family's faces. Some were confused, some were uncomfortable, and a few were even laughing awkwardly. My brother then went on to joke about how I had lied to him, how I had messed up my life and made poor decisions. It wasn't cruel, exactly, but it was so inappropriate. He was airing our private drama to the entire family, making light of something that I had worked so hard to move past. I couldn't believe he would do that. It felt like a betrayal, honestly. He had made me the punchline of his speech, and I felt humiliated. I could feel my face turning red, and I just wanted to disappear. I tried to laugh it off, but inside I was seething. After the event, I confronted him privately, asking why he felt the need to bring up something so personal and embarrassing. He shrugged it off, saying he didn't mean any harm by it and that I was being too sensitive. At that point, I lost it. I told him that he had no right to talk about me like that in front of everyone, especially considering how much I had tried to make amends with him. I reminded him that I had apologized for my past mistakes and that I had been working to become a better person. He seemed genuinely surprised that I was so upset. He apologized, but didn't feel sincere. It felt like he was just trying to smooth things over so the situation wouldn't get worse. Since then, I've been distant with him. I haven't reached out to him, and I've barely spoken to him at family gatherings. It's not like I'm refusing to forgive him, but I can't help but feel like he disrespected me in a way that I'm not sure I can move past. I tried talking to some of my friends and family about it, but they all say I should just let it go and that it was just a joke. They say that he didn't mean anything by it and that I'm holding on to something too long. But to me, it felt like a violation of my privacy and trust. I'm now in a position where I have to decide if I want to keep this rift between us or if I should try to move forward. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do. Part of me feels like I'm overreacting, but the other part of me feels like my brother really doesn't understand the impact of his actions. So, Reddit, AITA for not forgiving my brother for publicly humiliating me? Or am I just being too sensitive? AITA for refusing to lend my brother money for his life-changing business idea? I, 29M, have a brother, Mark, 31M, who has always had big dreams but not necessarily the best track record when it comes to following through. We've always had a somewhat complicated relationship. Growing up, Mark was always the golden child in my parents' eyes. He was charming, got good grades, and seemed to have his life together. On the other hand, I was the more practical one. I did well in school too, but I was always more grounded and focused on the reality of things. While Mark was out making wild plans, I was figuring out how to pay bills and save for the future. As we got older, Mark's tendency to chase dreams and jump from one idea to another didn't really change. He's had a number of ventures over the years that were supposed to be his big break. Some kind of app, a fitness clothing line, a few online businesses, but none of them ever took off. Every time, it was the same story. He was super excited, and then within a few months, the energy fizzled out and the business either flopped or disappeared altogether. He'd always come back to the family, telling us that next time will be different and how he just needed a little more help. Last year, Mark came to me again with another one of his life-changing ideas. This time, it was a revolutionary e-commerce platform. He said it would change the way people shop online and that he had identified a huge gap in the market. Of course, he had done all the research, or so he claimed, and all he needed was some seed money to get started. He told me it would only take a small investment to get it off the ground, and he would pay me back with interest in a year. He even promised that this would be the one. He sounded so confident, and I'll admit, it made me feel a little guilty. After all, he was my brother, and it would be nice to support him, right? However, I had my doubts. Over the years, I had seen Mark's repeated failures and the way he kept asking for money, not to mention the many times he seemed to ignore my advice and gave up too soon when things didn't go his way. I'd asked him what had changed this time, and he said he had learned a lot from his past mistakes and was more prepared. I wanted to believe him, but I was worried that it would be the same cycle all over again. I decided to do some research on my own before giving him anything. The more I looked into his idea, the more it seemed like a risky and unoriginal concept. I couldn't find any information about similar businesses failing in the way he described, but everything I found pointed to it being a niche market at best, definitely not revolutionary or a guaranteed success. I also found out that he didn't have a detailed business plan, just a rough outline with a lot of vague ideas. His pitch was mostly based on how great he thought his idea was, rather than any solid evidence of demand or feasibility. So, after thinking it through and consulting with my partner, I decided not to give him the money. I knew it was a huge risk, and frankly, I didn't have enough confidence that Mark was going to be able to follow through. I also didn't want to set a precedent where he expected me to bail him out every time one of his projects fell through. When I told him I wouldn't lend him the money, Mark was crushed. He tried to convince me that this was different, that I was making a mistake by not supporting him. He said I was just being too practical and that I was holding him back from his dreams. I told him that I didn't think it was about being practical. It was about being realistic. I explained that if I invested, I would be taking on a huge financial risk, and I wasn't willing to do that without more assurance that it would actually work. Mark didn't take it well. He accused me of not believing in him and said I was just like everyone else who doubted him. He even went as far as to say that I didn't want him to succeed because I was afraid he'd outdo me, like there was some kind of competition between us. That hurt, honestly. I've always tried to be supportive of his dreams, even if I didn't agree with them. But I could only go so far with blind faith. The situation only got worse over the following weeks. Mark began to distance himself from me. He stopped coming to family gatherings and didn't reach out as much. I could tell my parents were disappointed in me for not supporting him, but they didn't say much. They've always been the type to give him the benefit of the doubt, no matter what. It felt like I was the one who was in the wrong for making a choice that felt right for me. Fast forward to a few months later, and I found out that Mark's latest business venture ended up flopping again. This time, he hadn't even made it past the first stage before the money he invested ran out. He was now struggling with the fallout, and it seemed like he was blaming everyone else except himself. He'd been pitching the idea to a few family members, including our parents, and when he found out I hadn't lent him the money, he told them how unsupportive I had been. I'm sure he painted the picture of me being selfish and unwilling to help my brother achieve his dreams. I haven't heard from him directly since then, but I know he's still upset. Some mutual friends have reached out, saying that I was in the wrong for not helping him. Apparently, he's been telling people that if I had just believed in him, he could have succeeded. My partner and I are still on good terms, but it's been awkward at family gatherings. My parents keep trying to convince me that I should apologize and make things right, but I don't know if I can. I didn't do anything wrong by being cautious, and I still think I made the right decision for me and my finances. So, am I the asshole for refusing to lend my brother money for his business idea? Should I have just taken the risk and believed in him, or did I make the right call by saying no? AITA for calling off my best friend's move-in after she broke my trust multiple times? Okay, so this is a bit complicated, and I'm feeling conflicted, so I'm hoping for some unbiased opinions. I'll try to keep it as short as I can, but this is a situation that has built up over time. I, 28F, have a best friend, Sarah, 27F, who has been in my life since college. We've always been really close, and I've always considered her more like a sister than a friend. For the past few years, we've been living in different cities. She moved away for work, and I stayed in my hometown. We've stayed in touch regularly and visited each other, but it's been tough with the distance. About 6 months ago, Sarah told me that her job was transferring her back to my city, and she was looking for a place to live. We had talked about this idea in the past, and I had always said I'd be happy to have her live with me temporarily until she got settled. My apartment has a spare bedroom, and I thought it would be fun to have her around again, especially after not seeing each other much for a while. At first, everything seemed great. Sarah was super excited about moving back, and I was looking forward to catching up, having her around, and being there for her as she got used to life and new job again. We talked about the logistics, and I told her that the only thing I needed was for her to respect the space and be mindful of keeping things clean. My apartment isn't huge, but it's cozy, and I didn't want her to feel like she was walking on eggshells, but I also didn't want to feel like I was constantly picking up after someone. Well, Sarah moved in about a month ago. At first, it was great. We hung out a lot, shared meals, and even talked about old times. However, things started going downhill after a few weeks. It started with small things at first. She would leave her stuff everywhere, laundry in the living room, dishes piling up, clothes in the bathroom. I'd ask her to clean up after herself, and she'd apologize but then do it again. I didn't want to be a nag, but it started getting frustrating. I had to remind her every couple of days to pick up after herself, which felt like I was taking on the role of a mom rather than a friend. Then there was the issue with her boyfriend, Jason, 30M. He started spending a lot of time at the apartment, sometimes for days at a time. I had no problem with him visiting, but it started to feel like he was always here, especially when Sarah wasn't home. I'm not a huge fan of being around people constantly, and I began to feel like I had no privacy in my own home. Jason was nice, but I didn't want to feel like I was living with a couple. When I expressed my discomfort, Sarah acted like I was being unreasonable. I let it go because I didn't want to cause drama. Then the real issues started. A few weeks ago, I came home from work to find that Sarah had been hosting a party at the apartment without asking me beforehand. She'd invited some of her old friends, people I didn't know well, and it was chaos. There were drinks spilled on the carpet, loud music blaring, and random people wandering around. I was pissed. I immediately asked her what the hell was going on, and she apologized, saying she didn't think I'd mind since it was just a few people and she'd kept it small. I was furious. I told her that I would have appreciated being asked before she invited people over, especially when I wasn't home. It was my space, and I wasn't comfortable with having strangers in it without notice. To make matters worse, when I came back from cleaning up the mess, I found that some of my personal things were missing. Small stuff, like a few pieces of jewelry, a watch I'd left on my dresser, and a book I'd been reading. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but I knew I hadn't misplaced them. I asked Sarah if she'd seen anything, and she immediately got defensive. She said she didn't know where they were and that I must have misplaced them. I dropped it, though, because I didn't want to accuse her of something without being sure. Over the next few days, I noticed more things disappearing. My favorite hoodie, my makeup, even some food I'd bought. When I confronted Sarah, she claimed she didn't know where any of it was. I was starting to lose my patience, but I didn't want to get into a huge fight. I decided to take action, so I started marking my things in subtle ways, like using a piece of tape on the bottom of my coffee mug and putting a small sticker on the inside of a drawer. Sure enough, a few days later, my coffee mug was gone, and the tape had been removed. The mug had also been cleaned, and my sticker was gone from the drawer. I had to know the truth, so I asked Sarah point blank if she had taken my stuff. At first, she denied it, but after some back and forth, she admitted to taking a few things, saying she just borrowed them and forgot to give them back. I was livid. I told her that borrowing things without asking was a huge breach of trust, especially when she knew how much I valued my stuff. She apologized, but it felt like a half-hearted apology. I didn't feel like she truly understood the severity of what she'd done. After that, things between us were awkward. I couldn't shake the feeling that she didn't respect me or my boundaries, and it hurt. I started noticing even more little things that made me feel like I was just a place for her to crash. She stopped making any effort to clean up after herself, and every time I asked her about it, she'd promised to do better, but nothing ever changed. A week ago, I had had enough. I told Sarah that I couldn't live with her anymore. I told her I didn't feel like she was respecting my space, my things, or my boundaries, and it was taking a toll on our friendship. She was shocked and hurt. She asked if we could talk about it, and I agreed. We had a long conversation where she admitted she had taken advantage of my kindness and that she wasn't really respecting the living situation. She promised to be better, but at that point, I just didn't feel comfortable having her stay with me anymore. I gave her a month to find a place, but she's been upset with me ever since. She's now telling our mutual friends that I'm being overly dramatic and that I'm being unreasonable for not wanting to live with her anymore. I know I may have handled it poorly, but I felt like I had no other choice. I care about Sarah, but I also care about my mental and emotional well-being. So, AITA for calling off her move-in? Should I have given her more chances to change her behavior? Or did I do the right thing by setting boundaries? AITA for not letting my friend move in with me after she lost her job? I, 30M, have a friend, Rachel, 29F, who I've known for about 7 years. We've been through a lot together, college, breakups, job struggles, you name it. Over the years, I've always considered her a close friend, and we've helped each other out during tough times. A few months ago, Rachel lost her job. It wasn't her fault. She worked in marketing for a startup that went under due to financial issues. She was devastated, of course, but she assured me she would find something else soon. At first, things didn't seem too bad. Rachel was still paying her bills with some savings and said she was interviewing for a new job every week. However, as the weeks turned into months, I started to notice that Rachel wasn't really making much progress. She wasn't getting any job offers, and the interviews she did have didn't seem promising. She started becoming more withdrawn and anxious, constantly talking about how she was running out of money and didn't know what she was going to do. A few weeks ago, Rachel reached out to me in a panic. She had just received an eviction notice because she hadn't been able to keep up with rent. She said she had a couple of months left before she had to leave, but she had nowhere else to go. Her family lives in another state, and they weren't an option for her, so she asked if she could move in with me until she got back on her feet. Now, I want to be clear that I'm not some cold-hearted person. I've always tried to help Rachel when she needed it, and I've always been there for her. But this situation was different. I've lived alone for a while now, and I really value my privacy. I also have a small apartment, 2 bedrooms, one of which I use as a home office. My living space isn't huge, and I wasn't sure how the dynamic would work if Rachel moved in. I also felt a bit uneasy because of the pressure she was putting on me to help her, even though I didn't know how long she'd be staying or if she would actually be able to contribute to rent and bills once she was here. I didn't feel like I had the emotional capacity to be her full-time support system, especially when I had my own life and stress to manage. I had a conversation with her, trying to be as kind as possible. I explained that while I felt bad for her, I didn't think it was a good idea for her to move in with me. I told her that I valued my space, and I wasn't sure if I'd be able to be the kind of support she needed right now. I also told her that it wasn't just about the space, but about the emotional toll that living together might take on our friendship. I said that I didn't want to jeopardize our relationship by living together in such a stressful situation. I offered to help her in other ways, like assisting with job applications, reviewing her resume, or even helping her find a temporary place to stay, but I told her I just didn't think living together was a good option. Rachel was really upset by this. She told me that I was being selfish and that she needed help. She said that she couldn't believe I wouldn't offer her a place to stay after everything we've been through together. I felt guilty, but at the same time, I stood firm on my decision. I told her that I didn't want to risk our friendship, and I didn't think living together would work in either of our best interests. After that, things got pretty awkward between us. She stopped texting and calling as much, and when we did talk, it was strained. I found out from mutual friends that she was telling people I had refused to help her when she needed it the most, and that I had abandoned her during a difficult time. Some of our friends reached out to me, saying that I should have been more understanding, especially since Rachel had helped me in the past when I was going through tough times. They all seemed to think I was being cold and uncaring, but I felt like they didn't understand my perspective. I didn't want to just give in because it was easier. I genuinely believed that offering her a place to stay wasn't the right thing for either of us. A few days ago, Rachel called me, and we had another long conversation about everything. She said she was still looking for a job, but that she was now staying in a cheap motel and was starting to feel really hopeless. She asked again if I would reconsider letting her move in, promising that she wouldn't be a burden. She said she'd look for work every day, contribute to the bills, and keep to herself as much as possible. I felt terrible hearing her like that, but I still didn't want her to move in. I told her I was still sticking with my decision, and that I didn't want our friendship to suffer because of the situation. Now I'm left wondering if I made the wrong decision. My parents think I should have just let her stay with me, especially since I have the space and I'm not using the second bedroom anyway. They said that in family and friendship, you help each other no matter what. Some of my friends agree with me, saying that it's okay to set boundaries and that I'm not obligated to put myself in an uncomfortable situation. But Rachel has been really hurt, and I feel like I might have let her down when she needed me the most. So, AITA for not letting my friend move in with me after she lost her job? Was I being too harsh by not offering her a place to stay? AITA for refusing to help my sister with her kids after she ignored my boundaries for years? This is a bit of a long story, but I'm hoping to get some clarity on whether I'm in the wrong here. I, 30F, have a younger sister, 26F, named Sarah. Our relationship has always been complicated, but I've tried to be there for her in the ways that I can. I'm an only child, so I was kind of a second mom to her growing up. Our parents were often busy, and I'd always look after her when they weren't around. This dynamic, however, continued into adulthood, and it's something I'm starting to regret. Sarah got married a few years ago and has 2 kids, a 4-year-old girl, Emma, and a 2-year-old boy, Lucas. I've been very supportive since she became a mother, helping out when I could and offering advice, even though I don't have kids of my own. I've never been the super aunt type, but I've always tried to be there for her and her family. I'd babysit occasionally, take Emma out for ice cream, and help with grocery runs whenever she needed a break. I didn't mind doing this at first, as I knew being a parent is tough, and I wanted to be helpful. But over the years, things have changed. Sarah started asking more and more of me. It went from the occasional favor to expecting me to drop everything every time she needed help. It started with her wanting me to babysit last minute for things like doctor's appointments or errands, which I didn't mind at first. But then it became a regular thing. She'd call me in the middle of the day on a weekday, asking if I could come over for a couple of hours to watch the kids, often giving me very little notice. At one point, I was watching the kids for her 2 to 3 times a week, sometimes for hours on end. I had to cancel plans with friends and even miss work events to help her out. The tipping point came a few months ago when I had a serious conversation with Sarah about my boundaries. I told her that I loved her kids, but I could no longer be the default babysitter every time she needed a break. I explained that I had my own life to manage, and constantly dropping everything for her wasn't fair to me. She was upset, but she agreed that we'd work something out and that I wouldn't have to help as often. However, nothing changed. In fact, it got worse. Sarah started to get passive-aggressive about it. She complained to other family members about how I wasn't helping her as much anymore, making me sound like the villain. She'd tell me that it must be nice to not have kids, and you'll understand when you have your own, implying that I couldn't possibly comprehend what it's like to raise kids. This bothered me because I never said I didn't understand or sympathize with her struggles. I just didn't want to be the one to bear the brunt of it. Despite our conversation, she continued to ask for help constantly. Whenever I told her I couldn't babysit because of work or personal commitments, she would get upset, saying I was too busy for family and don't care about my niece and nephew. These comments really stung. I always made time for her when I could, but there was only so much I could do before I started feeling resentful. Then, a few weeks ago, she crossed a line. Sarah had an emergency situation where her husband had to work late, and she needed someone to pick up Emma and Lucas from daycare. I was already tied up with work and personal commitments, but she texted me multiple times, saying it was urgent. She begged me, saying, "I don't know who else to ask. You're the only one who can do this." I had to decline because I was in the middle of a project at work that couldn't be postponed, but I still felt guilty. The next morning, I found out from my mom that Sarah had told everyone that I refused to help her in her time of need, and that I was too selfish to care about family. This pissed me off. I felt like she had no regard for my boundaries, and I was sick of being made to feel guilty for living my own life. I eventually called Sarah to confront her about it. I told her that I was done being the backup babysitter and that I could no longer drop everything every time she needed help. I said I would be happy to help her on occasion, but I needed her to respect my time and stop making me feel like a bad person for saying no. She broke down crying, saying that I was abandoning her and that she couldn't do everything alone. I tried to explain that I wasn't abandoning her, but I couldn't be her constant fallback. Since that conversation, things have been tense between us. She hasn't really spoken to me much, and when we've interacted, it's been cold. Our parents have gotten involved, with my mom trying to mediate, telling me I need to be more understanding of Sarah's situation. My dad has said that I'm being too harsh and not being a good sister. I know they're just trying to keep the peace, but I feel like my needs and boundaries are being completely ignored. Now, Sarah is reaching out to me again, asking for help with the kids. She needs someone to watch them for a few hours while she runs errands, and she's playing the emergency card again, saying she has no other option. I feel like I've already made it clear that I'm not available for last-minute requests anymore. I don't want to be seen as the villain in this situation, but at the same time, I can't keep sacrificing my time and mental health just because she can't manage her responsibilities. So, AITA for refusing to help my sister with her kids after years of her ignoring my boundaries? AITA for refusing to let my sister stay at my house after her eviction? I, 30F, have a younger sister, Sarah, 27F, who has always been a bit reckless. We didn't grow up with a lot of money, but our parents were always present and supportive. I got the impression that Sarah never really took things seriously, whether it was school, jobs, or even relationships. I, on the other hand, worked hard to stay on top of things, built a solid career, and have always been responsible with my finances. We've always had a somewhat tense relationship because of these differences, but we've managed to get along. Recently, Sarah's life took a downward spiral. She dropped out of college a couple of years ago to find herself and started bouncing from job to job. She was never able to hold a steady position for more than a few months, and I'm not sure if it was because she wasn't trying hard enough or if she just didn't care. She lived in a series of places, always moving from one apartment to another because she either couldn't make rent or didn't want to live with her roommates anymore. Her relationships also seemed to always end in chaos, and she'd either break up with her partners or get kicked out. My parents, while supportive, were starting to get frustrated. They didn't want to enable her bad habits, but they still tried to help when they could. A month ago, I found out that Sarah had been evicted from her latest apartment. Apparently, she hadn't paid rent for 3 months and had been avoiding the landlord's calls. She called me out of the blue, saying she needed a place to stay temporarily. She promised it would be for a short time, just until she figured things out. She said she was looking for a new job and would get back on her feet soon. She mentioned that she had been staying with a friend, but that situation had fallen apart too. I don't have a lot of extra space in my apartment, but I also don't like seeing my sister struggling. I've helped her before when things were tough, though I've always felt that she took advantage of my kindness. Last year, she asked me for money to cover rent because she had spent all her savings on a last-minute trip to Bali. I gave it to her, but she never paid me back, and I never really brought it up because I didn't want to start a fight. But this time, something felt different. I told Sarah that I would be happy to help her out with finding a job or giving her some advice, but I wasn't sure I could offer her a place to stay. I explained that my apartment is small, and I really don't have the room for an extra person. I also told her that I didn't want to enable her situation. She had made a series of bad choices, and while I wanted to support her, I didn't think it would be healthy for either of us if she stayed with me. I wanted her to take responsibility for her actions and not just rely on me as a crutch. Sarah didn't take this well at all. She accused me of being selfish, saying that if I really cared about her, I'd let her stay. She said I was just like everyone else in the family, always criticizing her and never really understanding her. She told me that I had no idea how hard things had been for her and that she wasn't asking for much, just a roof over her head until she could get back on her feet. She even said that I wasn't being a good sister and that my refusal to help her was proof that I was only looking out for myself. I stuck to my decision, and that's when the situation escalated. Sarah started telling our parents that I was being cruel, and they immediately started calling me, asking me to reconsider. My mom especially was upset, saying that it's what family does. We help each other. She argued that Sarah had always been a little wild, but she was still my sister, and I should be there for her during this time. My dad also expressed his frustration, saying that I was being too hard on Sarah and that I could help without it becoming a permanent situation. I felt guilty, but at the same time, I knew I was doing the right thing for myself. I've always had to set boundaries with Sarah, but it feels like every time I do, I'm the one who gets painted as the villain. In the past, I've bailed her out, and it's never led to anything productive. She hasn't changed, and I'm starting to think she never will unless she faces the consequences of her actions. My partner, who has heard all about Sarah's previous antics, completely agrees with me. We both feel that it's not about being unsupportive. It's about encouraging her to take responsibility for her own life. But now it's been a few weeks, and things have become tense in the family. My parents are pressuring me to make things right with Sarah. My mom keeps bringing up how hard things must be for Sarah, and she's made me feel like I'm the one who should apologize for not helping. Sarah is still upset with me, and she's been posting passive-aggressive things on social media, implying that I'm a terrible sister. It's creating an uncomfortable atmosphere at family events, and I feel like the odd one out. My relationship with my parents is also a bit strained now, and I'm not sure how to move forward. So, AITA for refusing to let my sister stay at my house after her eviction? I feel like I've already given her a lot of chances, and I don't want to keep enabling her behavior, but am I being too harsh? Should I have just let her stay, even though it felt like setting myself up for more frustration? AITA for refusing to let my sister-in-law bring her kids to my vacation. I, 29F, have been married to my husband, Ben, 32M, for 3 years now. Ben and I don't have any kids of our own yet, and we've been talking about starting a family soon, but for now, it's just the two of us. We've always been pretty independent people, enjoying traveling, having spontaneous weekend away, and keeping our schedules fairly flexible. This all changed when we started planning a vacation to Italy. We've been wanting to do this trip for a while, and after saving up and getting everything in order, we finally picked a week in June for our getaway. We're going to be staying in a villa in Tuscany, and it's going to be the first time either of us has really done anything extravagant like this, so we're both really excited about it. Ben's family is really close-knit. He has a younger sister, Emma, 34F, who has 3 kids, Tommy, 8, Lily, 6, and Max, 4. I don't mind Emma and her kids. In fact, I get along with them just fine. However, there's always been this unspoken tension between me and Emma. She's a bit overbearing. She loves to be involved in every part of Ben's life and often tries to invite herself to things we're doing, or sometimes even tries to take control of situations that don't involve her. So, when we were discussing the vacation plans, I assumed it would just be me and Ben, as we had originally intended. That is, until Emma called me last week. She started by saying how thrilled she was about our trip and how much fun we were going to have. Then, after some small talk, she dropped the bomb. She and her kids wanted to come along. She mentioned how she and her husband had been planning to take a vacation too, but they had just been too busy, and she thought it would be so nice for the kids to have a family vacation in Italy. At first, I thought she was joking, but then I realized she was serious. I wasn't exactly thrilled at the idea. Ben and I had planned this trip as a special getaway for just the two of us to reconnect and experience something new together. I wasn't really looking to babysit or deal with the logistics of coordinating a vacation with 3 young kids. Not to mention, I was envisioning peaceful dinners in a vineyard, sightseeing, and having some quiet time together, not chasing after kids in the streets of Rome or trying to entertain them while we explored Tuscany. I've also heard Emma say before that she struggles with her kids' behavior, which is a huge red flag for me. So, I told Emma that I wasn't comfortable with the idea of her bringing the kids. I explained that Ben and I had envisioned this vacation as something for just the two of us, and I didn't want to change those plans. Emma was very upset, but I thought I had made myself clear. I figured she would let it go. However, that was not the case. The next day, Emma called Ben to talk about it, and she made him feel guilty. She told him how hurt she was that I was being so selfish and that she really needed a break from the kids. She said that the kids would love to see Italy, and that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for them. Ben was caught in the middle, and although he agreed with me that the trip was supposed to be just the two of us, he also didn't want to upset his sister. I could tell Ben was torn. He came to me later that evening and said that maybe we could compromise and let Emma and the kids join us for part of the trip. Maybe for a few days, but not the entire time. He argued that it would be nice for the kids to experience Italy, and that he felt bad for Emma because she had been dealing with the stress of being a mom and could use a break. I told him that I didn't want to compromise. I had planned this trip as an escape for just the two of us, and I didn't want to deal with the stress of adjusting our plans to accommodate her. We had a long conversation about it, but we didn't come to a resolution. Ben said he'd talk to Emma again, and that he would make sure to set some boundaries so that it wouldn't be overwhelming for me. I wasn't convinced, but I agreed to let him handle it because I didn't want to create conflict between him and his family. A couple of days later, Emma called me again. She started by saying she understood I didn't want to change our plans, but she still wanted to join us for part of the trip. She proposed that they would only come for the second half of the week, and that they'd even book a separate place to stay so we wouldn't have to share a room or villa. She assured me that it would be low-key and the kids wouldn't be any trouble. I was annoyed at this point. She clearly wasn't respecting our original plans. I told her that I didn't want them to come at all. I didn't think it would be fun or relaxing for any of us if we were constantly adjusting to accommodate her and the kids. She pushed back, saying it would be a family bonding experience and that it would be rude to invite Ben, but not her and her kids. That's when I started to lose my patience. I told her that I didn't think it was rude to want to spend time alone with my husband and that I had every right to want a vacation without kids. I didn't mean to sound harsh, but it felt like she was pressuring me to change my plans, and I was getting frustrated. Emma got really upset. She accused me of being selfish, saying that I wasn't considering how hard she worked to raise her kids and how much she needed a break. She said I was being unreasonable for not wanting to include them, and that it was clear I didn't care about her family's happiness. I tried to explain that this trip wasn't about excluding anyone. It was just about having time for myself and Ben. She hung up on me after that, and I've heard nothing from her since. Ben is upset too. He says that I'm being too rigid and that I could have been more understanding of Emma's situation. He told me that I was making a big deal out of something small and that I should have just let Emma join us for a few days. He says that he doesn't want this to cause a rift in our family and that I should reconsider my decision. Now, I'm feeling guilty. I don't want to cause drama, but at the same time, I don't want to feel pressured into changing my plans just to accommodate Emma and her kids. I've been looking forward to this trip for a long time, and I want it to be special and stress-free. But I also don't want to hurt Ben's relationship with his sister or make him feel caught in the middle. So, AITA for refusing to let my sister-in-law bring her kids on our vacation? Did I overreact by saying no, or was I justified in wanting a kid-free trip? Hey friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what could be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. AITA for refusing to let my brother bring his dog to my house after he got evicted. So, this situation has been eating at me for a while, and I'm genuinely torn about whether I did the right thing or not. I, 28M, have a younger brother, David, 25M, who has always been a bit irresponsible when it comes to managing his life. He's great when things are going well, but when life throws him curveballs, he tends to spiral. Over the years, I've had to step in a few times to help him out, whether it's covering his rent when he lost his job or lending him money when he got into debt. Every time, he promised that it would be the last time, that he was going to change, but those promises have never really materialized into anything long-term. A few weeks ago, David got evicted from his apartment. The whole thing happened really fast. He missed a few months of rent, and by the time he realized how bad it had gotten, it was already too late to save his lease. He called me one night, completely panicking, telling me that he didn't know what to do and that he had nowhere to go. I felt bad for him, obviously, but I also knew this wasn't the first time he'd found himself in a tough spot. I've been helping him for years, so I wasn't exactly thrilled about the idea of taking on the responsibility again. However, I do care about my brother, and I didn't want him to end up on the street, so I offered him a place to stay temporarily, just until he figured out what his next move was. I live in a 2-bedroom apartment, and while it's not huge, it's big enough for the two of us for a short period. I thought it would be a good way to help him get back on his feet and get his life together again. I did have one condition, though. I told him that he couldn't bring his dog, Max, with him. Now, here's where things get tricky. David has had Max, his German Shepherd mix, for about 3 years, and they're incredibly close. I get that, but Max is not an easy dog. He's very high energy, doesn't always listen to commands, and has destroyed several things in David's previous apartments, mostly furniture, shoes, and a few electronics. On top of that, I've never been a huge dog person. I'm not against them, but I don't particularly enjoy living with them, especially not in a small apartment like mine. I've also had some bad experiences with pets in the past, so I've always been hesitant to have one around, especially in my living space. I made it clear to David that I couldn't handle the additional stress of caring for a dog, and that it wasn't just a matter of space. It was a matter of my personal comfort. David was upset, of course. He said I was being unreasonable and that Max was his responsibility, and he couldn't imagine being separated from him. He tried to convince me that Max would be fine and that he would make sure he wouldn't cause any problems in the apartment. I stood my ground. I didn't want to have to deal with the mess, the noise, and the responsibility of caring for a dog, especially when I already had my own life to manage. I told David that if he wanted to stay, he could, but he would have to make arrangements for Max, either leave him with a friend or family member, or find a pet boarding place. I even offered to help him pay for the boarding if it came down to that. But David insisted that he couldn't afford to board Max, and he didn't want to leave him with anyone else. I told him again that this was the only option, but David just kept saying that if I didn't let Max stay, he couldn't come at all. After a few days of back and forth, David gave me an ultimatum. Either he and Max both came, or he wouldn't come at all. I was torn because I really didn't want to leave my brother stranded, but I also didn't want to compromise my own boundaries and comfort. I stuck to my decision and told him that I wasn't comfortable with Max being here. David got really angry, accusing me of being heartless and that I was only thinking about myself. He said that I was prioritizing my own comfort over his well-being, and that it was cruel of me to make him choose between his dog and a roof over his head. He said that if I truly cared about him, I'd accept Max, no questions asked. After that conversation, David cut ties with me. He told me that he didn't need my help if it came with conditions, and that I had proven that I wasn't the kind of person he could rely on. He said I was selfish and that our relationship would never be the same again. I tried reaching out a couple of times, but he didn't respond. Eventually, he moved in with some friends, and I haven't heard from him much since. My family is divided on the situation. My mom and dad both think I was too harsh and that I should have let David bring Max, especially since he has nowhere else to go. They believe that families should support each other no matter what. On the other hand, some of my friends have told me that I did the right thing by standing firm with my boundaries, especially since David has a history of taking advantage of my kindness. I'm feeling really conflicted. On one hand, I feel like I was right to set boundaries and not let my brother impose on me in a way that would make me uncomfortable. On the other hand, I keep wondering if I was too rigid and if I could have made an exception for him and his dog. I don't know if I was being unreasonable by prioritizing my own comfort over his needs. So, AITA for refusing to let my brother bring his dog to my house after he got evicted? Or was I right to stick to my boundaries? AITA for refusing to let my brother and his girlfriend stay at my house after they insulted my lifestyle? I, 27F, have a younger brother, 24M, and we've had a pretty typical sibling relationship over the years. We argue, we fight, but overall we get along. However, recently, things have been a little tense between us, and I'm not sure if I'm overreacting or if I'm in the right here. Let me explain the situation, and I'd love some insight from the Reddit community. A little bit of background. I live in a pretty small, cozy house on my own, which I absolutely love. It's a 2-bedroom place in a nice neighborhood, and I don't have a ton of stuff, but it works for me. I've always been a minimalist and prefer a clean, clutter-free environment. I also work from home, so I'm very particular about the space I've created for myself. It's my sanctuary, and I don't like when people come in and disrupt that, even though I do try to be a good host when people do visit. My brother has been dating his girlfriend, Emma, for about a year now. They seem happy together, but we've never been super close to Emma, mainly because she and I have different lifestyles and values. I'm not going to say I dislike her, but we're just not on the same wavelength. I'm very introverted and value my quiet time, while Emma is more extroverted and has a lot of friends. She's the type who likes to host big parties and get-togethers, which honestly stresses me out. I've met her a few times, and we've had cordial conversations, but I wouldn't say we're friends. A few weeks ago, my brother and Emma asked if they could stay at my place for the weekend. They live about 2 hours away and were coming to my city for a concert, so they needed somewhere to stay for the night. I've always said that if they needed a place, they were welcome to stay, but I wanted to be clear about some house rules first. I told my brother that I'm not really comfortable with people having loud gatherings or leaving things all over the place when they stay at my house. I also mentioned that I have a pretty strict no overnight guest rule, unless I know the person very well, because of how much I value my space and privacy. I thought these were reasonable boundaries, and my brother seemed to understand. When they arrived at my house, things were fine at first. We had dinner together, and I tried to be a good host, offering drinks and making sure they felt comfortable. But as the night went on, things started to unravel. After we had finished eating, my brother and Emma started getting a bit loud. They were joking around, and I could hear them laughing and talking through the walls of my house. I'm not saying that they were doing anything outrageous, but it was louder than I would have liked. I tried to let it slide, but after about an hour, I went to the living room and asked them if they could keep the volume down a little. I told them I had to work early the next morning and didn't want to be kept up too late. At this point, things started to get awkward. Emma made a face and muttered something under her breath that I couldn't fully hear, but sounded like she was annoyed. My brother immediately jumped in, saying I was being a bit too sensitive and that they were just having fun. I explained that I wasn't trying to be a party pooper, but that I just wanted some peace and quiet in my own house. They agreed, but you could tell that the mood had shifted. The next morning, I had an early meeting, and I let them know that I needed to be up by 7:30 a.m. I asked them to please keep the noise down in the morning so I could get some rest. They both assured me it wouldn't be a problem, and I went to bed, hoping things would settle down. When I woke up, my brother and Emma were already up and talking loudly in the living room. I tried to stay calm, but after about 20 minutes of them chatting and laughing, I went out and asked them to lower their voices again. This time, Emma seemed visibly irritated and said something like, "It's your house, but it feels like we're walking on eggshells around you. We can't even talk without worrying about bothering you." I was taken aback by this and told her I didn't mean to make them feel unwelcome, but that I was working from home and needed some quiet to be productive. She rolled her eyes, and my brother chimed in, saying, "I don't know why you're so uptight about everything. It's not like we're throwing a party." This hurt. It felt like they were making fun of me for wanting a peaceful environment, and I could tell that Emma was starting to get frustrated with me. I felt like I had asked for basic respect, but they weren't seeing it that way. At this point, I was already feeling really uncomfortable, and I started to question if I had made a mistake inviting them to stay in the first place. Later that afternoon, I went out to run some errands, and when I came back, I noticed that they had left their stuff all over the living room. Their bags, clothes, and shoes were scattered everywhere. I didn't want to sound like a control freak, but I couldn't stand seeing the mess in my space, so I politely asked them to clean up before they left. Emma rolled her eyes again, but she complied. The evening came, and my brother and Emma were about to leave. They had been planning to leave around 7 p.m. to head back home, but they decided to hang around a little longer. I reminded them that I had to get up early the next day, and they finally packed up and left. However, as they were leaving, Emma turned to me and said, "Honestly, I don't know how you live like this. It's so quiet and uncomfortable here. I would go insane if I lived in a place like this." I was taken aback by this comment and didn't know how to respond. My brother didn't say anything, but I could tell he was a little embarrassed by what Emma said. After they left, I felt drained and upset. I didn't feel like I'd been unreasonable in asking them to be respectful of my space, but I also couldn't shake the feeling that they saw me as uptight and unwelcoming. I've been thinking about this a lot lately, and I'm not sure if I'm overreacting. I know that my lifestyle is different from theirs, but I don't think it's too much to ask for a little peace and quiet in my own home. I'm feeling pretty hurt by the comments Emma made, and my brother's lack of support in the situation is also bothering me. So, Reddit, AITA for refusing to let my brother and his girlfriend stay at my house after they insulted my lifestyle. AITA for telling my friend I can't support her decision to let her toxic ex live with her again. I, 29F, have a close friend, Amanda, 28F, who has always been a bit of a doormat when it comes to relationships. I've known her for years, and while she's an amazing person, she has a tendency to let people walk all over her, especially when it comes to her ex-boyfriend, Matt, 30M. They've broken up and gotten back together at least 3 times, and each time, it's like we're starting from scratch. It's not just that they break up, but when they're together, Matt treats Amanda horribly, ignoring her, lying to her, and even outright disrespecting her. Whenever they break up, Amanda says she's done for good, but within a few months, she's back in his arms. The most recent breakup happened about 6 months ago. Matt had cheated on Amanda again, and this time, she said she was done for good. I supported her through the breakup, helped her move out of his apartment, and reassured her that she was better off without him. For a while, things were good. Amanda seemed to be doing better. She started a new job, got involved in a fitness routine, and was actually starting to regain some of her confidence. I was proud of her. But then, a couple of weeks ago, she told me something that completely threw me off. She called me up, sounding stressed, and told me that Matt had reached out to her. He said he had changed and wanted to get back together. According to Amanda, he was finally taking responsibility for everything and was begging for another chance. I wasn't surprised. This was exactly what always happened. He'd beg for forgiveness, make all these promises, and then treat her like garbage again. But this time, Amanda sounded different. She told me she was thinking about letting him move back in with her temporarily, just to give him one more chance because he was struggling with living on his own after they broke up. I could tell from her tone that she really wanted me to support her decision. I felt a mix of emotions. On one hand, I want to be there for Amanda, but on the other hand, I've seen this movie before. She had just gotten to a better place emotionally, and now she was about to let Matt back in her life, potentially undoing all the progress she had made. I've never liked Matt, and I know he's manipulative. Every time Amanda's with him, it's like she loses a part of herself. I've told her this before, but she always brushes it off. She insisted that this time it would be different, that he was really going to change. I tried to reason with her. I told her that I was concerned for her well-being and that bringing Matt back into her life would likely hurt her again. I asked her to think about whether she was truly okay with the idea of letting someone back into her space who had shown so little respect for her in the past. I told her I couldn't support the decision to let him move in, especially knowing how much he had hurt her before. I said that I loved her, and I just didn't want her to fall into the same toxic pattern. Amanda was hurt by what I said. She started crying, telling me that I didn't understand how hard it had been for Matt after their breakup. She said he was going through a lot and that he really needed her. She mentioned that he'd lost a lot of friends and that he didn't have anyone to turn to. She said that he was struggling with depression and was in a really bad place. She also told me that he promised things would be different this time, that he was going to therapy, and that he wanted to prove to her that he had changed. I still wasn't convinced. I told her that it wasn't her job to fix him. She needed to prioritize herself, and this wasn't a healthy situation. I also reminded her that he had treated her terribly in the past, cheating on her, lying, and manipulating her into thinking it was her fault. I said that no matter how much he claimed to have changed, actions speak louder than words, and she should be cautious. Amanda got defensive. She said that I was being too judgmental and that I didn't understand the situation because I wasn't in a relationship with him. She accused me of trying to control her life and told me I was overreacting. I tried to explain that I was coming from a place of care, but she wasn't having it. She said that if I couldn't support her decision, then maybe I wasn't a true friend. She told me that she didn't need me to tell her what to do, especially when it came to her relationship with Matt. The argument got worse, and eventually we stopped talking for a few days. I was hurt that she couldn't see where I was coming from. I felt like I was being a good friend by setting boundaries and looking out for her, but she was treating me like I was the one in the wrong. A few days later, I found out that Amanda had let Matt move back in with her. She texted me to let me know, and she said she hoped I would come around and be happy for her. I felt a wave of frustration and sadness. I knew this wasn't going to end well, and I hated that I had been so vocal about my concerns and still felt powerless to stop it. I also couldn't shake the feeling that I had lost a part of my friend, the version of her that was strong and independent before Matt ever entered the picture. Since then, things have been tense. I haven't reached out to Amanda much, and she hasn't really contacted me either. I know she's still seeing Matt, and I'm just waiting for the inevitable fallout. I've had a few mutual friends ask me how things are going with Amanda, and I've told them the truth. She's chosen to let Matt back in her life, and I can't support that decision. Some people have said that I was right to voice my concerns, while others have said I should have just supported her, regardless of my personal feelings about Matt. So, AITA for telling my friend I couldn't support her decision to let her toxic ex live with her again. Should I have just kept quiet and let her figure it out on her own, or did I do the right thing by speaking up? AITA for kicking my brother out of my house after he let his dog destroy my furniture. So, this is a bit of a messy situation, and I'm feeling pretty conflicted about it. I, 27F, have a brother, Jake, 30, who I love dearly, but we've never had the best track record when it comes to boundaries. He's a good guy, but he's often a bit inconsiderate, especially when it comes to respecting my space and my stuff. I don't mind helping him out, but sometimes I feel like he takes advantage of my generosity. Here's what happened. About 2 months ago, Jake's apartment flooded, and he was in a bit of a bind. He didn't have renter's insurance, and it was going to take a while for his place to be livable again. So he asked if he could crash at my place for a couple of weeks while he sorted things out. I said yes, of course. I have a 2-bedroom apartment, so it wasn't a huge deal. I figured it would be fine for a short while. I made it clear that I wasn't expecting him to be a permanent house guest, and that he would need to find somewhere else to stay once his place was fixed. He was fine with that. But here's where things started to go sideways. Jake has a dog, Max, a large, hyperactive lab mix. Max is a sweet dog, but he's a handful. Jake and I have talked about Max before, and I've always been a little hesitant about having him around because he's kind of destructive. He has a habit of chewing on furniture and getting into things when he's bored. I made it clear when Jake moved in that while I was okay with him bringing Max, I didn't want him allowed to run around the apartment unsupervised. My place isn't huge, and I didn't want my furniture or my things getting ruined. Jake promised he would be responsible, and I trusted him. Well, after the first couple of weeks, things started to get out of hand. At first, it was just a few small things. Max would leave muddy paw prints on the carpet when Jake would let him inside after walks. And there were a couple of accidents on a rug that Jake quickly cleaned up. No big deal, I thought. But then, one day, I came home to find that Max had chewed through the corner of my brand new couch. I was absolutely livid. I called Jake immediately and asked what happened. He seemed surprised, but not overly concerned. He said, "Oh, Max probably just got bored. I'll try to keep him away from it from now on." I told him that wasn't enough, and that he needed to figure out a better way to manage Max, because I wasn't okay with my furniture being destroyed. Jake apologized and promised he'd do better. For a while, things seemed fine, but then the problems started escalating. I came home a few days later to find that Max had chewed up one of my throw pillows, and then the following week, the back of my dining chair was completely shredded. I was starting to get really frustrated. I asked Jake multiple times to keep an eye on Max, and to make sure he wasn't left alone in the living room. Jake said he was doing his best, but honestly, it didn't feel like it. He would leave Max in the living room while he went to work or ran errands, and the dog would destroy whatever was within reach. It was starting to feel like Jake wasn't taking me seriously. I started to have conversations with him about the situation. I told him I understood that accidents happen, but this was getting excessive, and I didn't want to keep living with the constant worry that Max was going to wreck my things. I even offered to help pay for a dog trainer or to get Max more toys to keep him occupied, but Jake brushed it off. He said it wasn't a big deal and that it was just part of having a dog. But I was starting to feel like I was being way too accommodating and my patience was wearing thin. Then, last weekend, things came to a head. I came home after a long day at work to find that Max had gotten into my closet and torn apart my new leather handbag. It was one of my most expensive items, and I had saved up for months to buy it. When I saw it, I was absolutely livid. I lost it and called Jake. I told him I was done and that I couldn't keep living like this. I told him he needed to either control his dog or move out. He tried to apologize, but at that point, I had reached my breaking point. Jake got defensive. He said I was overreacting and that I was being too harsh on Max. And he tried to downplay the situation, saying that I was being dramatic about a few chewed up things. He insisted that he would fix it and that I was being unfair by kicking him out. He said he didn't have anywhere else to go and that it wasn't his fault that the flooding had happened. I told him that I didn't care about the flooding anymore and that he had had 2 months to figure things out. It wasn't my responsibility to let him stay and let his dog destroy my belongings. After that, things got really tense. Jake packed up his stuff and left the apartment, but he hasn't spoken to me since. Our parents have been trying to mediate the situation, but I feel like they're not understanding why I'm so upset. They think I'm being too hard on Jake and that he's just going through a tough time, so I should be more patient. They keep telling me that it's just stuff and that I'm being too materialistic about it. But it's not just the stuff, it's the principle of respecting my space, my boundaries, and my things. Now, I'm feeling torn. Part of me feels guilty for kicking him out, but at the same time, I don't think I should have to tolerate this kind of behavior in my own home. I'm not asking for perfection, but I do think he could have been more responsible with his dog, especially when I was so clear about my expectations. I love my brother, but I'm tired of being taken advantage of. So, AITA for kicking my brother out after he let his dog destroy my furniture? Should I have been more patient? Or did I have a right to stand my ground? AITA for not letting my best friend move in after she broke up with her boyfriend? So, I, 27F, have a best friend, Katie, 28F, and we've known each other since high school. We've been through everything together: school, relationships, family drama, and all the ups and downs that come with life. We're super close, and I've always considered her like sister. Katie has had a rough couple of years with her on-again, off-again boyfriend, Mark, 30M. They've been together for almost 5 years, but their relationship has always been toxic. He's cheated on her a few times, lied to her, and generally treated her badly. Despite all of this, she's always gone back to him, and every time she swears it's the last time. But of course it never is. About 3 weeks ago, Katie called me and said she was done with Mark for good. She said they'd had another huge fight, and she had finally decided to leave him. I could tell she was emotionally drained, but also relieved. She told me she needed to get away from him and wanted to take a break from everything. I immediately offered her a place to stay. I've always been there for her, and I was more than happy to let her crash at my apartment until she figured things out. I live alone in a 2-bedroom apartment, so it wouldn't be a big deal. Katie agreed, and she moved in the next day. I thought it would be a good temporary arrangement, and I was glad to be there for her during this tough time. At first, things seemed fine. She was obviously upset about the breakup, but we hung out, watched movies, and just talked. However, after a week, things started to get a little more complicated. Katie is a really needy person when it comes to emotional support, and I get that. She's been through a lot with Mark. But I started to feel overwhelmed. Every day, she would cry about Mark, replay their arguments, and talk about how much she missed him. I tried to be supportive, but after a few days, it started to feel like I was her therapist rather than her friend. I get that breakups are hard, but it felt like she was constantly dumping her emotional baggage on me. I work full-time, and I also have my own personal stuff going on, so it was exhausting to have every conversation revolve around Mark and their relationship. At the same time, Katie had become really dependent on me for everything. She would ask me to drive her places, help her look for a new apartment, and even cook meals for her. I didn't mind helping out a little, but it was starting to feel like she wasn't making any effort to take care of herself. She wasn't looking for a job, she wasn't applying for apartments, and she wasn't really taking any steps to move on from the breakup. It felt like she was just sitting in my apartment, wallowing in her sadness, and waiting for me to fix everything for her. After about 10 days, I had a conversation with her. I gently told her that I felt like she needed to start taking more responsibility for her own life and start making some progress. I told her that while I was happy to help, I couldn't be her only source of support. I said that I wasn't in a position to be her full-time caretaker, and that it was important for her to start focusing on herself and her future. I also mentioned that I needed her to start looking for a new place to stay because I didn't feel comfortable with her living with me indefinitely. I explained that I had a busy life, and I didn't want her to become too dependent on me, especially when I needed to focus on my own stuff. Katie was absolutely devastated. She started crying and said that she didn't have anywhere else to go. She said her parents lived in another state, and she didn't want to go back there because it would make her feel like she was running away from everything. She told me she couldn't afford a place on her own, and she had no idea how she was going to figure everything out. She said she didn't know what she was going to do without me, and that she needed me to help her more. She begged me to let her stay with me longer, and I could tell she was genuinely scared and lost. I felt terrible. I really did. But I also knew that I couldn't keep enabling her behavior. I told her I would help her with the job search, help her look for apartments, and offer emotional support when I could, but I couldn't keep letting her stay indefinitely. I also suggested she look into therapy or counseling to work through the breakup and everything else she was dealing with. I told her I wanted to be a supportive friend, but I needed some space to live my life too. The conversation didn't go well. Katie got angry and said I was being selfish. She accused me of not caring about her and of abandoning her when she needed me the most. She told me that she couldn't believe I was kicking her out after everything she'd been through, and that I was only thinking about myself. She said I had no idea how hard it was for her to deal with the breakup, and that I wasn't being a true friend if I couldn't offer her more support. She told me I was being cold-hearted and that our friendship would never be the same after this. I tried to explain that it wasn't about not caring, but more about setting boundaries. I said that I loved her and I wanted her to be okay, but I couldn't help her if she wasn't willing to help herself. She wouldn't hear it, though. She ended up packing up her things and leaving my apartment, telling me that she would figure things out on her own. Since then, she's barely spoken to me. She's posted a few passive-aggressive things on social media about how her so-called friends let her down when she was at her lowest. I've reached out a couple of times to check on her, but she hasn't responded. Now, I'm feeling really conflicted. I understand that breakups are hard, and I want to be there for Katie, but I don't know if I was too harsh. I feel like I tried to be supportive while also maintaining my own boundaries, but I don't want to lose her as a friend over this. My other friends think I did the right thing by setting limits, but my family thinks I should have been more understanding and given her more time. I just don't know if I was wrong for asking her to move out or if I was right to protect my own space and emotional well-being. So, AITA for not letting my best friend move in after a breakup? Was I being too harsh, or did I handle it the right way? AITA for calling out my best friend for being rude to my boyfriend? I, 26F, have been friends with Kate, 27F, for over 10 years. We met in college and immediately clicked. We've been through everything together: breakups, job changes, family drama, and everything in between. She's always been like a sister to me, and I thought our friendship was pretty solid. That is, until I started dating my current boyfriend, Ryan, 29M. Ryan and I have been together for about 6 months now, and things have been going well. We've met each other's families, spent holidays together, and have had a great time getting to know each other better. My friends know about him, and I've told them how happy I am with him. So, naturally, I wanted to introduce him to Kate. We all live in the same city, and I invited Kate to meet Ryan a few weeks ago at a small get-together in my apartment. I thought it would be a great opportunity for them to meet in a relaxed setting. I didn't expect them to be best friends right away, but I hoped that they'd at least get along and be cordial. From the moment Ryan arrived, things were a little off. Kate was polite but distant, which I found odd. She didn't seem to be engaging with him much, and when I tried to get the conversation going, she just gave short answers. I didn't think too much of it at the time, figuring maybe she was just having an off day. But then, as the night went on, it got worse. Ryan and I were talking about a trip we were planning to take in the fall, and Kate suddenly interrupted, saying, "Oh, I didn't realize Ryan was so involved in the planning. I thought you were making all the decisions yourself." My name. It was a weird comment, and I could tell Ryan felt awkward, but I brushed it off. Kate had been like that sometimes, joking around in a way that wasn't always the best timing, but she was my best friend, so I figured it was just her way of being playful. However, as the night continued, things escalated. Ryan went to the kitchen to grab a drink, and I was chatting with Kate on the couch. She leaned over and whispered, "You know, I've never seen you act so clingy. You don't usually act this way with guys. He's just so, I don't know, basic." I was shocked. I've never heard Kate talk about anyone like that, especially someone I care about. I tried to brush it off and told her that I was happy with Ryan and that I wasn't acting clingy. I just felt comfortable around him. Kate didn't respond to that, but she had a look on her face that made it clear she wasn't happy about my relationship. Later that evening, when Ryan and I were sitting on the couch, Kate came over and sat next to us. She started asking him questions about his job and hobbies, but every time he answered, she seemed to find a way to criticize or question him. She asked if he liked to read, and when he mentioned that he wasn't much of a reader, she made a face and said, "Wow, that's surprising. I figured someone as old as you would have read a few more books by now." Ryan seemed uncomfortable, but he tried to laugh it off, saying that he preferred podcasts and audiobooks instead. Kate didn't drop it, though, and instead said, "I just can't imagine being with someone who doesn't enjoy reading. It's kind of a red flag, don't you think?" I was starting to feel really awkward at this point. I could tell Ryan was getting more and more uncomfortable, and it wasn't like Kate to act so judgmental. I was starting to feel embarrassed, but I didn't know how to intervene without making things worse. The evening came to an end, and Ryan and I decided to leave. As we were getting our coats on, Kate pulled me aside for a moment. She said, "I'm just being honest, okay? I don't think he's right for you. You deserve someone who's more interesting. He's so average. I was floored. I've never heard Kate talk about anyone I dated like that, let alone someone I care about. I told her that I didn't appreciate what she said, and she just shrugged it off, saying, I'm just looking out for you. I don't want you to settle for someone who's just fine. I left her apartment, feeling frustrated and upset. I didn't understand why she was being so rude to Ryan when she'd never acted that way toward any of my other boyfriends. I tried to talk to her about it the next day, but when I brought it up, she just dismissed me. She said I was overreacting and that I should grow up and stop being so sensitive. For the past week, I've been trying to process everything. I'm starting to feel like I'm stuck between two worlds. On one hand, Ryan and I are really happy together, and I don't want to let anyone make me second-guess my relationship. On the other hand, Kate is my best friend, and I've never felt like she's treated someone I've dated with this level of disrespect. I tried talking to some other friends about it, and they all seemed to think Kate was being out of line. They agreed that her comments were unnecessary and hurtful, especially since Ryan didn't do anything to warrant that kind of treatment. But some of them have also told me that I need to have a real conversation with Kate, instead of just holding it against her. So, here I am, unsure what to do next. I don't want to choose between my best friend and my boyfriend, but I also don't want to let Kate get away with treating him poorly. I don't know if she's jealous or if she just doesn't like him, but her behavior was hurtful, and I don't know how to move forward from here. AITA for calling out my best friend for being rude to my boyfriend? Should I talk to her again, or do I just let it go? AITA for refusing to let my cousin move in after she kicked out her girlfriend? I, 32F, have a cousin, Jenna, 30F, who I've been very close with for most of our lives. We grew up together, spent holidays and vacations together, and for the most part, I always considered her one of my best friends. Over the years, we've supported each other through a lot of life events, and I've always been there for her, especially during tough times. Jenna has had a string of unhealthy relationships. She tends to fall for people who don't treat her well, but she's incredibly forgiving, and after each breakup, she always promises that she'll be more careful next time. But somehow, she keeps finding herself in the same situations. This time, she was in a relationship with her girlfriend, Emily, 28F, for almost 2 years. I didn't know Emily well at first, but Jenna spoke highly of her, and they seemed to be doing well. They had a few bumps along the way, but nothing that seemed too concerning to me. However, about 3 months ago, things took a drastic turn. Jenna called me in a panic, saying that she and Emily had gotten into a huge fight and that Emily had left her. Jenna was devastated, claiming that Emily had cheated on her and that she had caught her with another person in their apartment. Emily, according to Jenna, had packed her things and left without even giving her a chance to explain. Jenna was heartbroken, but she said she would be okay eventually. I tried to support her during that time. I listened to her vent, reassured her that she deserved someone better, and encouraged her to take some time for herself. Jenna even asked me if I thought she should reach out to Emily and try to talk things through. I told her that considering how things had ended, it was probably best to move on. But of course, that didn't last long. A month after Emily left, Jenna called me again, asking if she could come over to my apartment. She told me that she and Emily had been talking and that Emily was now saying she was sorry and missed their life together. Jenna explained that Emily had promised her she had learned from her mistakes and wanted to work things out. Jenna said they were going to try again, and it seemed like she was all in. I had some reservations. Jenna had been through this cycle before, and I didn't want to see her go down the same path of heartbreak. I expressed my concern, but Jenna assured me that this time would be different. I wasn't sure I believed her, but I didn't want to push her too hard, so I just nodded and told her I hoped she would be happy. Fast forward another 2 months, and Jenna called me again, but this time, it was a different story. She was angry and upset, saying that Emily had once again betrayed her. Apparently, they had moved in together again recently, and the tension between them was building. Jenna told me that Emily had been spending more time out with friends, had started being secretive with her phone, and wasn't as communicative as before. Eventually, Jenna confronted her, and Emily admitted that she was still in contact with an ex and had gone out with him a couple of times. Jenna felt crushed, and I could hear the pain in her voice. This time, She said that she was done with Emily for good. I was sympathetic, of course, but I also told her that this wasn't the first time something like this had happened and that she needed to seriously think about what she wanted moving forward. I asked her why she kept letting Emily back in her life after all the hurt she had caused. Jenna got defensive, saying that Emily had promised it was a mistake and that she was just struggling with her past. Jenna also told me that Emily had nowhere else to go and was staying with some friends temporarily, but now she had to leave their place because they weren't comfortable with her staying there any longer. Then came the real kicker. Jenna asked me if she could move in with me for a little while. She said she needed a fresh start, that her apartment reminded her too much of Emily, and she didn't want to be alone. She mentioned that she was going to look for a new place and needed time to figure things out. I immediately said no. I told her that I loved her and wanted to support her, but I couldn't have her move in with me under these circumstances. She was taken aback. Jenna said I was being selfish and not understanding of her situation. She told me that I had always been there for her in the past, so why was I suddenly refusing to help her now? She insisted that she wasn't asking for a permanent arrangement, just a few weeks until she could get back on her feet. She even reminded me of all the times I'd stayed with her when I needed help and how she'd always open her home to me. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this was a bad idea. I explained that I couldn't enable her to keep falling back into the same toxic patterns. I was worried that by letting her move in, I would just be allowing her to wallow in her hurt and be stuck in a cycle of relying on other people instead of doing the work to heal. I also told her that I had my own life to manage, and living together would just complicate things. I needed to protect my own space, and I didn't think I'd be able to give her the emotional support she needed if she was living with me. She was furious. Jenna started accusing me of not being there for her, saying that she had no one else and that I was abandoning her when she needed me the most. She told me that I was being judgmental and that I had no idea what it was like to be in her shoes. She also said that I was just stuck up and only cared about my own life and not about the people who love me. It hurt to hear her say that, especially after everything we had been through together. Since then, things have been awkward between us. Jenna hasn't really talked to me much. She's posted vague, passive-aggressive things on social media, and when we do communicate, it's usually short and cold. I've been feeling guilty, but I also stand by my decision. I don't want to be dragged into another one of her destructive cycles. I care about her, but I need to take care of myself too. A few days ago, I found out from a mutual friend that Jenna has moved in with her parents temporarily. Apparently, they weren't thrilled about it, but agreed to let her stay for a while. I'm glad she has somewhere to go, but I'm still unsure if I made the right decision. I feel like I let her down, but at the same time, I think I did the right thing for both of us. So, AITA for refusing to let my cousin move in after she kicked out her girlfriend? Should I have been more supportive, or did I make the right call by not getting involved in her drama again? AITA for not letting my best friend bring her boyfriend on our girls' trip? So, this is a bit of a weird situation, and I'm genuinely unsure if I'm being too controlling or if my feelings are justified. I, 28F, have a best friend, Leah, 29F, who I've known for about 12 years. We've been super close since high school and have always made it a point to have a yearly girls' trip. These trips are our chance to reconnect, recharge, and have a bit of a break from our busy lives. For the last few years, we've been going to cabin in the mountains or doing weekend getaways to places that are a little off the beaten path. The tradition is really important to both of us, and we've always been able to get away for a couple of days without any issues. We're both in serious relationships, but we've always kept our trips as a girls-only thing, just for us. This has been the case for all of our past trips, and I really look forward to this time with her every year. Leah's boyfriend, Ryan, 30M, and my boyfriend, Mark, 31M, get along fine, but we've always made it clear that this trip is our time to bond without the guys. It's just the way it's always been, and I love that we have this tradition. Here's where things got complicated. Leah and Ryan have been together for about 2 years, and they're pretty serious. They live together, and things seem to be going well. I really like Ryan. He's a good guy, and we all get along. But recently, Leah brought up the idea of having Ryan come with us on the trip this year. I thought she was joking at first, but she was serious. I immediately felt a little uncomfortable with the idea. I love Ryan, but our girls' trip has always been something that was just for us. It's a time for Leah and me to talk about things we wouldn't talk about in front of the guys, relax without any distractions, and just enjoy each other's company. I didn't want that dynamic to change. So, I tried to explain to Leah that I was really looking forward to this being a girls' weekend, and that I wasn't sure how I'd feel about having a boyfriend there, especially since we've never had that in the past. She was kind of disappointed, but seemed to understand, and we left it at that. A few days later, she brought it up again, and this time she was a bit more upset. She said she didn't understand why I was being so adamant about it, and that Ryan had been wanting to come along because he felt left out of all our trips. She mentioned that they had been talking about how nice it would be for the four of us to hang out and get to know each other better. She also told me that she felt like she was missing out on making memories with Ryan while I was off on these trips with her. I tried to explain that I totally get that she wants to include him, but I didn't think it would be the same if he came along. I said it's not that I didn't like him or didn't want to spend time with him. It's just that this trip was special to me, and it wouldn't feel the same if he was there. I also mentioned that I thought it might create some weird tension. I mean, Ryan would probably feel a little left out since it's supposed to be just the two of us, and we'd all feel like we had to cater to him a little, which would defeat the purpose of the whole trip. She didn't seem to get it and said I was being selfish. She argued that I was being unreasonable for not letting her bring her boyfriend, and that I was being unfair to her because she was the only one in the group without a boyfriend. She said that if I was really her best friend, I would understand how important it was for her to spend time with both of us together. I was really taken aback by how she was reacting, and I felt bad, but at the same time, I felt like I had every right to want the trip to remain as it always had been. The next day, I was still feeling a bit upset, and I tried to talk to Mark about it. I explained the situation, and he agreed with me. He said that if it were him, he would feel weird being the only guy there, and that it was nice that Leah and I had something just for us. He suggested that Leah and Ryan could have their own weekend trip later in the year, and that way, we could still keep the tradition intact. I felt a little better hearing that Mark was on my side, but I still didn't want to upset Leah. A couple of days went by, and I didn't bring it up again. But then Leah texted me saying that she had been thinking about it, and that maybe she'd just cancel her plans with Ryan for the weekend. She said she didn't want to make me feel uncomfortable, but that she hoped I understood how hurt she was by my refusal. I felt horrible, like I was being a bad friend for standing my ground. At this point, though, I still felt really strongly that it wouldn't be the same if Ryan came along, and I didn't want to back down just because I was feeling guilty. I ended up texting her back and saying that I understood why she was disappointed, but I still felt that it was important to keep the trip as it had always been. I told her that I valued our time together and that I hoped she could see where I was coming from. I also mentioned that maybe she and Ryan could plan a trip for the two of them sometime later, but that this particular trip was something I needed to have for myself. I tried to be as kind as I could while still being firm, but she didn't respond for a few hours. When she finally did respond, she said that she was really hurt and that she was struggling to understand why I couldn't make an exception this one time. She said it felt like I didn't care about her relationship or about her needs, and that if the situation were reversed, she would never act this way. She mentioned that it felt like I was prioritizing some sort of tradition over her happiness. I felt like she was making this about something it wasn't, and that made me feel even worse. I've always supported her relationship, and I've always been there for her, but this was a boundary I wasn't willing to cross. At this point, I'm feeling really torn. I feel like I've been clear about why I'm not comfortable with Ryan coming along, but I also feel like I might be losing my best friend over something that seems so small. She's still not talking to me as much, and I'm starting to get the sense that she's holding a grudge. So, AITA for not letting my best friend bring her boyfriend on our girls' trip? Should I have made an exception to keep the peace, or did I have a right to keep our trip the way it's always been? Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.